Delta is ready when you are. Hey folks. Welcome to January 2020 live, our first live of the new year, and which we're looking forward to the new year with 2020 vision. I'm sure I'm the very first one to say that. As always, a big thank you to Titebond for underwriting this, and a big thank you to you for watching. So if you're on the YouTube, tonight going to try to toggle back and forth between the two, but in all honesty, here's the deal. Really the host website for this is WWGOA.com, and when you go to the top of that, there's a menu, and when you click menu, it says WWGOA Live, and that's where these lives are actually hosted. And that's the landing page to which I pay the most attention. So if you're on YouTube and you got a question you're really hoping to get answered tonight, I strongly urge you, I recommend that you go over to WWGOA.com and post your question on the chat box there. I'm way more likely to see it, because if things get really busy, which they often do, then I tend to just concentrate at WWGOA.com. So that is forewarned is forearmed, as they say. All right. Speaking of questions, and I hope everybody had a great Christmas. I think I bought one gift this year, and I gave about 20, which means the other 19 were handmade. I was just on the phone with my sister, and I'll talk about this, and then we'll go to your questions, because the questions always outstrip my ability to answer in time. There was a tree in my mom's front yard. If you watch me on Instagram, you saw some of this. There was a tree in my mom's front yard that got cut down, and a cookie was saved from that tree that my sister wanted made into a table. It was a 24-inch section, really pretty chunk of wood. It was Burr oak. And if you've never seen the bark on Burr oak, it's amazing. It's incredibly thick, and I treated the whole thing with pentacryl, and the bark stayed stuck. There's some small cracks developed in the cookie, but nothing really bad. I put it on hairpin legs. So one, my sister was thrilled. I often refer to these things as heirloom wood, chunks of wood that come from something that means something to you. So this was in my mom's front yard. The other thing I am so excited about is, at some point, just out of curiosity, I counted the growth rings. And in this 24-inch section, there were about 170 growth rings. My sister in college was a history major, so I know she's intrigued by history, and I think no matter what, she would have thought this was cool. So on the back of this thing, I got a label maker, and I identified key points in history. 170 growth rings. The oldest big event on there was the California Gold Rush. Gunfight at the OK Corral. End of the Civil War. So it was just, to me, it was so incredible that it's kind of a give you goosebumps thing, that this tree was a baby in my mom's front yard. Obviously my mom's house wasn't there, but this tree was a baby growing in this spot at the California Gold Rush and during the Civil War. It's just, and I'll make it even better. This was a piece that was about 24 inches in diameter from a branch. The base of this tree, close to where it was cut, was about 40 inches. So just to make the math easy, it was, at the base, it was about 50% larger than the piece I had. Did that mean it had 50% more growth rings? Does that mean the tree was actually 250 or 300 years old? Make the math easy, 300 years old. It was a baby in 1720, before this was a country. It's incredible. Okay, I have digressed. Plenty. I'm going to have a slug of coffee. I'm usually not a nighttime coffee drinker, but today I am. Preguntas. Here we go. Hi George, thanks for the live show. As a new woodworker just starting out, should I save up for a 6-inch or 8-inch jointer? I'm a beginner, but I'm trying to buy tools for longevity. I would be grateful for any wisdom you share. Wisdom, wow, thank you for using that as a adjective for me, not an adjective, whatever. Here's my deal. Um, when I first started, when I opened my first shop 20 years ago, I had a 6-inch joiner. One of the things I looked for in that machine, and you can still find this on jointers, is I looked for a joiner that had bed extensions on it. So in all honesty, when you look at 6-inch joiners, 90% of them look the same, which is the casting looks like it's all from the same company, which it probably is. The one I had at that time was from General International, and it had the regular bed, but then it had extensions that bolted onto the end. Now the reason I wanted that is that with jointers, as a general rule of thumb, you can joint stuff that's about twice as long as your machine. So one of the limitations with a jointer, of course, is the width of the head, but the other one is the length of the bed. So I wanted to go to 6-inch fit my price point, but I wanted the longest bed I could get. So I got that General with the bed extensions on it. My next jointer was still a 6-inch joiner, but I went to the Powermatic. I think the model is 54, and it's got an exceptionally long bed. That's not, in the Powermatic's case, that's not done with extensions on the casting. The casting itself is really, really, really long. So I stuck with a 110 volt 6-inch machine, but went with the Powermatic because the bed was so long. Today I have an 8-inch joiner. Much longer bed, spiral cutter head, and an 8-inch head. Now, today I do find with the 8-inch joiner in my shop, I'm face jointing much more than I did when I had the 6-inch joiner. And I like that. I like being able to do that. So I'm not going to give you a rock solid black and white answer here. My answer is going to be a 6-inch joiner can get you really far in your woodworking. By planing materials carefully to get them flat, I did that instead of face jointing. By building shop-made jigs where you use a router for flattening, you can flatten large boards bigger than the size of your jointer. So there are a lot of workarounds there that if a 6-inch fits your pocketbook better and waiting for an 8-inch means you got to wait 2 years to save the money, a 6-inch would do very well for you. That being said, I love the cut quality. I've got a Laguna 8-inch. I love the cut quality that comes off the spiral cutter head. I love having the wider head, and I am face jointing on it a lot. I love that the bed is about as long as an aircraft carrier. So if you can go that route, if you can save your pennies and go that route, that'd be great. But I don't want to talk down the 6 inches because it's that can serve you very well also. Jay says, I'm having a lot of trouble sharpening lathe tools. I watched sharpening videos, but somehow I just can't get the knack. I have to admit I have not purchased the work sharp machine that you use. Is that really the answer? Well, yes and no. Sharpening is idiosyncratic to the individual. There are people who do turning and they sharpen everything on a whetstone. They sharpen everything by hand. A system I just got, I'm gonna carry it over here because it's really cool. So hold please. Hold please, I'm not leaving you. Well, I'm leaving you a little, but. So I got a system with CBN wheels. And I'm having a brain bubble on what that stands for. Someone will put it in the comments for us. But this was expensive, but I turn a lot. I love turning bowls. So I wanted a system that was going to give me great repeatability, really good grinds on my tools, and a Rikon low RPM grinder CBN wheels from Wood Turner's Wonders is where I purchased this from. Then there's also a jig here that holds everything in place so that when I'm grinding, I get repeatability. I get that same grind time after time after time. So Work Sharp is a solution. Low RPM grinders are a solution. The Wolverine attachment is a solution. Wood Turner's Wonders with CBN wheels, and this is a Kodiak, is the name of their attachment, is a solution. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and a lot of it just comes down to, like anything, practice, practice, practice. It's really important to get your lathe chisels sharp, so that and ground sharpen the same way every time, so that you're not introducing another variable to your turning. You want to have that cutting angle the same all the time. All right. So Aussie says he's in a different time zone, or she. It's Friday, 11:25 in the morning. That's kind of cool. Putting a dust collection system in a long, narrow room, 40 feet long. I plan to put a 6-inch pipe along the wall with 1.5 horsepower dust collector. Okay. It's a statement, not a question. Then somebody says, do you think a dust collection system that would run a shop air cleaner while no tools are being used, and then when a tool is used, the dust collector takes care of the tool instead of the air cleaner, switches back and forth when the tool is not in use, collector continuously working as you do? Interesting. Does that exist? Is that a product that exists? So the premise here is that there's some kind of a filter gizmo hanging here. When I'm not running a tool, I'm drawing air, just ambient air, through that filter. When I turn on a tool, this blast gate closes, the blast gate on my table saw opens, it picks up there, then it comes back to this one. Seems like a cool idea. Oh, then there's a wrap up to the question here. So back to the 40-foot shop, 1.5 horse dust collector. To finish the question, I'll have 11 Ys in the line. Is 6 inches too big? Will I have enough velocity? I don't know. I just don't know enough about, this is Ralph. I'm sorry, but I do not know enough about dust collection to effectively answer that. Intuitively, it feels to me like you're running a lot of pipe and a lot of Ys on a 1.5 horse dust collector. But I'm not, I don't know enough to conclusively say yes, no, here's the size you should have, here's the size pipe you should use, sorry. So we got Canada, Port Angeles, Washington, Longmont, Colorado. Somebody says focus needs adjustment. I don't think so. I'm looking, I have a monitor right here that's this big that I can see myself in. It looks pretty clear, and it's autofocus. Northern Italy, wow. Any new tools coming out this year you're excited about? I'll tell you what, a new tool I saw at the Las Vegas show, so this was last year, but it was only last July or August. It's called Smart Bench. The company is Yeti, Y-E-T-I, the Yeti Smart Bench. It's a CNC with a 4-foot by 8-foot capacity that folds up like sawhorses. So I saw it at the show. I've read the literature about it. I haven't run it, so I can't say, man, is it amazing and it does a wonderful job, because I haven't actually had my hands on it yet. But that was a showstopper at that show. I'm very interested to see $6,000 price point. I'm very interested to see how that develops, and I would love to run it. I'm new to woodworking and love your content. Thank you. You're an amazing teacher. Thanks. That's what I wanted to be when I grow up. I wanted to be a shop teacher. I'm in the market for a 3-horse SawStop, contemplating the industrial, which is in my budget, but debating the professional to also budget in a jointer. What are your thoughts? Well, I've got the 3-horse. I've had it since 2007. 3-horse, 220 volt SawStop. Um, I don't know what is the professional, I guess is my question. Is that the 110 volt version? That's more like a hybrid saw. I've used that at woodworking shows. I don't own one, and I've never had a problem with it. So I'll tell you what, SawStop does such a great job on their product. In addition to the fact that it's got the safety brake, their table saws, they really work hard to make a good product there. So you're not going to go wrong regardless of which saw you use. In my case, I'm a professional woodworker. My table saw is getting run all the time. When there are classes in here, it's running not continuously through the day, but a lot through the day. So I am glad I have the 220 volt 3-horse because of those reasons. But like I said, if the professional is a 110 volt system, I've never had a problem with that when I've used it at other events. And somebody is watching us on a JetBlue flight. That's pretty cool. Advice on finding a professional company to survey my shop and advise dust collection from Scott. Oneida, O-N-E-I-D-A, Oneida Dust Collection. I think there are a couple of approaches you can make to that. I don't know that they survey your shop, but I think you can send them dimensions, tool layout, the whole deal, and then they'll help you with sizing your dust collector, sizing the pipe, the whole concept there, the whole Megillah. All right, I'm jumping on to YouTube briefly. So Cameron says, beautiful table I made for my sister. Thank you. I'm really happy with how it came out. James says, when I use my planer, I turn the wood each pass. My friend says, don't do that. Turn it, flip it. I always do. So when you're planing wood, when you've got a piece you're sending through the planer, you want to plane toward the center. So what I mean by that is if I'm planing this piece, I would send it, next pass, send it, next pass, send it. If turn it, you mean turn it, that you shouldn't need to do. This is a really straight grain piece of fur, but just like when you're edge jointing, there'll be one direction where this planes the best. Provides the best surface finish. Once you've found that, keep going in that direction. So flip, yes. Rotate, that you don't need to do. Oh. Okay. Gary says, in South Africa, a baobab tree is 2,000 years old. Yeah, I saw baobab trees when I was living over there. They're amazing. And that whole thing is just, that old growth timber is just astounding. Would recommend a 6-inch joiner with a spiral head versus an 8-inch with straight knives. Not necessarily. I mean, I have a spiral cutter head with carbide inserts in it now, but for decades I used nothing but steel straight knives, and got fine cut quality out of them. So I don't think that needs to be an either or. Could you maybe show off your big workbench behind you? I've been wanting to build something like that. What things it can do, what you like about it, and maybe what you would change if you redid it. One thing I would change if I redid it is I would draw a plan as I was building it, because so many people have asked me for a plan and I don't have one. But yes, so here's the deal. My bench, this is a 4-foot by 8-foot bench, which I've had in here now, I guess maybe for a year or two. I love the real estate that's available on it, and I love having this big a bench. So let's move a little bit. I guess I'll start right from here and get you down to the bench top. Dog holes here, 3/4 inch dog holes. With the vise here, then I have dogs that'll go in here so that I can squeeze in between this point and this point in order to lock stuff in place. Additionally, I love Armor makes these. The vise might be in the way there. Armor makes these. So if I have a piece of material that I want to secure, that'll do that. That takes advantage of the dog hole. Then hanging here, these are a Bessie product. Go in the same 3/4 inch dog hole. Let me lock stuff down. So I'm really happy with that hold down aspect. I use that a lot. And then, let's see what you can see. Then, going down this way, there's another set of dog holes. No. Because there's an end vise here. So, same deal. If I do nothing but a bench dog, I've got a dog in the vise here, and I can sandwich stuff. Additionally, I can use the Armor hold down or the Bessie hold down in these holes. So I like that a lot. On top of that, I routed Rockler 4-foot T-track in. There are a number of devices that'll go into that T-track. So for instance, a Craig hold down can go there. These stops are also a Craig product. They'll slide in there. So let's say I'm running a belt sander and I just need to provide a backstop. I can put this in the bench and I can work against it, or if I'm using a hand plane, which I never do, but anytime you need a backstop, you can do that. So the T-track was, I'm very happy with that addition. Then obviously on this end of the bench, this is just pipe, 1/2 inch pipe from a home center, screwed into a flange. The flange in turn is screwed into the end of the bench. That's what all of that is hanging on. Then, let's see if I can get you there. It is on casters. On this side, that's a fairly deep set of shelves. Bottom shelf, center shelf. So that's all my portable power tools, or most of my portable power tools live there. And then the reason this overhang is so big is to accommodate the vise that's over here. So that's why that had to be that way. And then this side, see what you can see. This side is all drawers. Narrow ones on the top, so little stuff. These are all layout tools, more layout tools, and then larger drawers. Incredibly, some of them don't even have stuff in it yet. So overall, one part of the question was, what would I do differently? Not much. I guess I honestly can't even think of anything I would do differently. I really like the way it came out. It's on Rockler's workbench casters, which have a 400-pound weight load, and I'm exceeding that by a metric ton. But they're holding up okay. So I love that it's on casters because I do end up moving it around. All right. We'd like to know if there are any other hybrid saws that have flesh sensing technology besides SawStop. Nope. SawStop is the only one that's got that brake technology. There was very briefly in the marketplace, there was a benchtop, a job site saw from Bosch, but that's no longer available. And AJ answers us, CBN wheels are cubic boron nitride. Thank you, AJ. Somebody in Florence, Arizona, Huntington, Pennsylvania, Tacoma, Washington, Ontario, Canada. Is a trim router a necessity or just a fun thing to have? They're wonderful. I use a trim router all the time, even though I have lots of other routers. So, in fact, my trim router, I'll show it to you because in addition to being a trim router and being cool, in my foray down the cordless tool road, it's a rigid cordless trim router, and a lot of companies make these now. I love the fact that this is cordless. Very, very convenient. So no, it's a trim router in general is a great thing to have, and I would definitely entertain looking at the cordless ones, because that's the way that router commonly gets used. Having it cordless is great. Bob says, I realize you're not a dust collector specialist. Is it better to have one expensive dust collector or a couple smaller ones? In my shop, I have smaller ones. I have 3 smaller units. I have a dust collector that's only on my table saw, 110 volt unit, another 110 volt unit on that side of the shop that primarily picks up on my CNCs, another one on this side of the shop that's primarily my jointer planer and Supermax sander. If I could set it up, I guess I would prefer to have one big unit instead of 3 individuals. Part of that is a space constraint. You know, I've got 3 footprints instead of 1. But the 3 small units are working well, and basically I've got, ignore the table saw one, I've got the rest of the shop divided into 2 segments. That dust collector picks up on that side, that dust collector picks up on that side. So it works for me. Thomas says, any live build courses like the Cordless Tool Station coming up this year? Yes, I'm right over there. I'm building it as we speak. It's going to be a table saw accessory storage cabinet. And I'm just putting it together now. I'll shoot video on that in just a little bit. And that course will be live somewhere in the first quarter here. How can I learn to identify different woods? Part of that, a crappy answer is experience. The more you see, the more you'll be able to identify. There's a really good book called The Good Wood Handbook. I think it's on Amazon. And that book has pictures. It's got characteristics. It tells you where the stuff grows. So that's part of it, is you can look and see if this is growing where I am, does white oak even have a propensity to grow here? And that'll help identify it. So that's a great way to get started, is the Good Wood Handbook, and then match up what you see in there against what you're finding in the wild. I watched the video on setup of the Porter Cavill dovetail jig versus a Rockler jig. I wonder if the setup is about the same. Yeah, it's very similar. Those half blind jigs, or jigs like that also do through dovetails, there are some little idiosyncratic changes, but for the most part, the premise by which they work is very, very, very similar. Las Vegas, Nevada, Guadalupe. Stevens in Milton, Florida, just built up a full sheet workbench like that, loving it, getting ready to add dogs to it. Gary says, indication for down spiral versus up spiral. I own 11 billion up spiral bits and a couple of down spiral. So with an up spiral bit, the flutes on that look just like a drill bit. And and they act the same way, which is, as it's cutting, they're evacuating junk out of the cut all the time. Great for mortises, great for dados. Really, the only time I use a downcut spiral, even in my CNC work, is if I have something that's got a delicate surface and I want to make sure that I don't take a chance of chipping that. So a great example would be, you put bird's eye maple veneer or some other delicate thing onto a substrate and you're about to route it. It's possible an upcut spiral will lift and cause chips. A downcut is pushing down into the cut. So part of the downside of that is you're not evacuating the waste as readily as an upcut, but you're not going to chip the surface because you're down cutting. And then Gary says, does it change if you use it in a table or handheld router? No, because it's still upcut or downcut. William asked recommendation for a first table saw, and I always say with the SawStop technology that's available, save your pennies and buy a SawStop. There are something like 40,000 emergency room trips a year as a result of table saw accidents. No one thinks it's going to happen to them. SawStop products, they do a great job on the product, and you're protected by the brake. So I think first saw, third saw, 10th saw, SawStop is the way to go. Can you recommend 110 volt hybrid table saw? Same answer. I'd look at the SawStop stuff. Mark is in Kansas City. Thanks for watching. Okay, I'm jumping over to YouTube to see what I'm missing. Brian is in Owatonna, Minnesota, not too far from me. Pennsylvania, Saudi Arabia. Hey, I think that's a first. Massachusetts, Brazil. Jeannie says, can review the direction to route for different applications. Outside edge, inside, router table versus handheld. Yes. Let me, I'm going to run and get a frame because that gives us great examples for this. Hold, please. Here we go. Almost back. Okay. So, got a frame. Got a router. Isn't that serendipitous? When you look down at the top of a router, all routers spin clockwise in the northern hemisphere. No. All routers spin clockwise. So our rule here, and really our rule with any cutting tool, is that we want to go against the direction of rotation. So when I'm looking at the outside of this frame, and I'm going to cut it, the router bit is going clockwise, so my feed direction is counterclockwise. And if you go the wrong way, if I were to feed in a clockwise direction, the router starts to feel like it's self-propelled. And that's very dangerous. That's climb cutting. Then when we go to the inside of the frame, here, in order to keep our rule going, feed against the direction of rotation, because now we're cutting inside instead of outside. On the inside, I'll feed clockwise. So the rule is, on a router table, on the outside of an object, counterclockwise. On the inside of a frame like this, clockwise. As you're doing it, if it ever feels self-propelled, that tells you right away you're going the wrong way. On a router table, it's simple, right to left. On a router table, you're always going to go right to left. Barry says, what wood glue do you recommend? There's a lot of it depends on what you're doing. Titebond makes a boatload of different products. A lot of glue companies make different products. So 90% of my work in here is furniture, cabinets, that kind of stuff. So I'm using Titebond Original for that. And then my other glue bottles are over there. If I'm doing something for outside, either Titebond II or Titebond III. Titebond II is water resistant. Titebond III is waterproof. So if you're building a chair that's going to be outside, water resistant is fine. If you're building a planter that's going to be outside, you want waterproof. And then when I do, like if I make a knife and I'm putting a wooden handle on it, that's epoxy because we're doing steel to wood. So it's a non-porous surface and a porous surface. So epoxy will help you there. If I have to put two dissimilar materials or material that's wet, polyurethane glue is a choice for that. So there's a lot of it depends on the application. What are you working on today? Make Tools Metal Shop 2. I don't get that part of the question. Nice shop, thank you. You build, I did not build this shop, I built my old shop. Working on today, a cabinet project for that table saw accessory thing. Should I buy a spiral head for my Makita jointer? I don't know, because I don't know what they cost. So it is, you've got to evaluate. I know spiral cutter heads are not inexpensive. So you have to evaluate the investment of putting the spiral cutter head in an older machine versus possibly just replacing the machine. Chet asked, do you host tours at your shop in Wisconsin? I do, but you have to contact me first. Do not just show up. That would be bad. One, I teach on the road all the time. I may not be here. Two, if I'm up to my eyeballs in work, which I usually am, drop-ins are not good. So I'm easy to find. Shoot me an email, and if you're going to be in the area, we'll figure it out. Larry's in Southern Illinois. Roberto says, watching your fundamentals of cabinet making for face frames, do you need to use hardwood or can you get away with pine? Pine is fine. I've got a lot of shop cabinets in here that have pine face frames. In fact, the cabinet I'm building today, it's Euro style, so it's edge banded, not face frame. But the plywood is pine, the edge banding is pine, the drawer fronts are going to be pine, chunk of which is laying right there. So I'm doing all of the accessories, components, are all number 2 pine. What do I use to fill holes and cracks on tabletops? If it's a big crack, then I'm looking at my live edge slabs over there to see if there's one right in front with a big crack in it. Then I'm probably going to use resin, epoxy. If we're talking about tiny little like nail holes and that kind of stuff, Timber Mate is my go-to wood filler. All right. So Guadalupe says, on a project I have to do, I have to make a circular base, 1.5 inch thick with a 1/2 inch roundover. Because it's a circle, the grain will change on 2 sections of the circumference. What are your tips on creating such a large roundover without blowing the end grain? Great question. Light passes, and I'll tell you a product I have come to really like. I just seeing if there's a router nearby with it in it. When I buy roundover bits now, I'm buying the Freud Quadra Cut roundover bits. Surface finish off of them is amazing. Their ability to reduce tear out on end grain is amazing. So it's not, I have zero relationship with Freud. I'm just saying. I was doing a bunch of work in Baltic birch a couple years ago, and Baltic birch is really chippy stuff. And I had a roundover was involved. And I started getting these quadra cuts for that project, and they're really good. So part of it is light passes, so do your roundover in multiple passes. But then 2, consider getting one of those Freud quadra cut bits. Recommendations or suggestions for a woodworking show, conference, or convention for a beginner. The woodworking show, that's what it's called. You could Google it, is still out there, still in business. They're out on the East Coast. They're in, I don't know, the New England area, I think, this particular weekend. So you could Google that and find out where they are. I haven't been to one of those shows for a long time. There was a little bit of a drop-off in vendors, but the education at the shows is really good. Jim Heavey, Raleigh Johnson, a lot of active big-name woodworkers are at the show teaching all day, every day. So that's a really good, even if the vendor turnout isn't great for you buying tools, the education you can get at those shows is really, really good. And then outside of that, I would look at local woodworking stores, offer classes, Woodcraft, Rockler. I was just recently in North Carolina at the Klingspor event. There was a lot of education going on at that event. Larry says, when making a crosscut sled, do you need to use something thick like a 2x for the fence? Could a 1x work? I think so. I mean, my hedge on this is if you're starting at 1, if you're starting at 4/4 and you're planing it down and it's going to be 3/4 as a fence, I don't like that so much. If you're ending at a full 1 inch, I think that would be okay. Rick says, do I ever use CA? Yep, cyanoacrylate. Use it all the time. It's all the time. Making a wood kitchen countertop. Can I just glue the boards or should I use a dowel or a biscuit joint in addition to gluing? Gluing alone is fine. We've got stuff on WWGOA about the strength of glue joints where I glue boards together and then fracture them over the end of a bench. And the wood always fractures before the glue joint does. So on any kind of an edge-to-edge glue up, the big benefits to dominoes or dowels or biscuits is helping you align the surfaces. But from a strength perspective, if you've got a good glue joint, which means this edge on your countertop, this face is dead flat, this face is dead flat, and you glue them together, you're going to be fine. Jeremy is in Shongaloo, Louisiana. What a great name, Shongaloo. What's the history of that name? Am I going to the Toronto Woodworking Show in February? Not that I know of, but if they contact me fast, I'll go. My February is pretty full, but it's not currently on my plate. And AJ's telling us the Woodworking Show is in Springfield, Massachusetts this particular weekend. So if you're in that neck of the woods, you could check that out. All right, jumping over to the tube. Galway, Ireland, that's really neat. Brian asks, did I miss the finish on the end grain bowl? I will show you a bowl and you tell me if this is the one you're thinking of, if you were watching it on Instagram. So here, I'm going to do like a reveal. Oh, you can already see it. This is a piece of, we think it's red pine, but we're not sure. This was a log cookie. And cut it round, threw it on the lathe, turned it. On this side of it, there was a knot. And while I was turning it, I did get a little too aggressive with the chisel, and I caught that knot. And it split just a little bit. At one point, I already had finish on the outside, and I'm here to tell you, this thing under finish is absolutely beautiful. These dark stripes are incredible. It's just amazing. So anyway, cutting a little too aggressively, I exacerbated the split. So I brought it back. I was at my friend's house. I brought it back to my shop, just stewing on what could I do here. So one thing I thought about is I could dam this up, fill that with resin, and that'd be a solution. Could color the resin, could gold flecks in the resin, I don't know, lots of ideas there. Once this got back to my shop, one of the things that happened was, I think this environment is drier than where I was, so that crack opened up quite a bit. So there's no way to pull this back. That would be destructive. So what I'm going to do, here's the current plan. I'm going to erase the crackicity. I like it. And I'm going to get, I don't have any laying right here. It's in the other room. I'm going to use brass brazing rod. I'm going to cut it to length, bend it into a U shape. Net, I'm going to make a big, long brass brazing rod staple. and I'm just going to pin it across the crack, probably 3 of them. One high, one middle, one low. And the bowl is fine just the way it is, but I like the notion of the decorative element that it would add to put that brass across there. So I'm letting it sit. I want to make sure that this does whatever it's going to do. In other words, I don't want to have the brass on there and have this thing try to open up some more. So it's been about a week and a half today since it came into my shop. Probably by this weekend I'd be comfortable starting to work with the brass. It's the crack is pretty much the same now for the last 4 or 5 days. So that's the end grain bowl that I was working on at Paul's house a week ago Sunday. And it's a beautiful chunk of wood. So I'm really excited to get back to a point where I can get finish on it and incorporate that stitching. Need to buy a Dado blade set for my table saw to make finger joints. What brand? Oh man, lots of good ones out there. Freud, Infinity, Forest, Run Forest, Amana. Paul says, I want to make a large through mortise and a 3-inch tabletop using a router. How do you recommend doing that? Make a template, guide bushing on your router, and then plunge through. What material is the top of your workbench made out of? This is 1-inch Baltic birch plywood, 4x8 sheet, 2 layers. So I built the whole bench, and then I put the first layer on, one-man show, so there's no way I could lift up a thick top by myself and get it on here. So I put the first layer on, fastened it to the base, then layer of glue, second layer on, screws up from the bottom to adhere to the second layer, and that's how I put it all together. All right, back on GOA. Jay asks, what's the best gap-filling glue? Epoxy, really. The yellow glues will fill 2 or 3 thousandths gaps. I mean, so that's like nothing. That's less than about the thickness of a piece of paper. Polyurethane glue, a tiny bit more than that. But if you've really got a gap to fill, epoxy is the only one that's truly gap filling. Is there a size rule to make a coat rack so it won't tip over? Boy, base versus height. Man, not that I know of. Great question though. I guess the geometry I would be looking for is if I have a post onto which I'm going to put a hanger. Let's say the hanger is 4 inches long, and then of course a coat's going to go on there. I would want the leg to cantilever past the base more than that 4 inches, so that when the coat's hanging out here and lever arming down, that your foot is past that lever arm point. By how much? I don't know. One of the things you could consider is make the post, leave it unfinished, put your hangers on it, put your hardware on it, sorry, and then, hang on, and then just temporarily clamp feet to the bottom and see where you have to be to get that anti-tipping point. Prototype it, basically. So we have an answer on Shongaloo. It is believed the name Shongaloo came from the Choctaw name Shakalo, meaning cypress tree. Oh, that's cool. On the JetBlue flight, which is still crazy cool technology, When making a walnut kitchen table, what's the easiest way to connect the top to the frame? Tabletop fasteners. I almost always have these in inventory. So here is a tabletop fastener. And you put a saw kerf in the end rails, and then you screw this to the bottom of the tabletop. That allows the top to expand and contract independently of the base so that you don't get splits and checks. Doing enough craftsman style projects to warrant a mortiser. Are there disadvantages to using a drill press with hollow chisel bits versus mortising machine? Yep. I've heard of alignment problems when using adapters on a drill press. The biggest problem with mortising on a drill press is that cutting, the way a mortise chisel works on a mortiser is you've got an auger in the center surrounded by a square cutter. And what you're doing is you're leading with a drill, you're drilling a hole, and then you're shearing the rest of that wood out of there. It takes a lot of pressure. So on a drill press, a couple things. Table on a drill press, the table system, isn't really designed for the kind of down pressure that you do to do a mortise. So can you get over there and tighten the bejesus out of it and get it tight enough? Maybe. But what can happen on a lot of drill presses is the tables either flex or they creep as you're pushing down. The other thing is leverage. The length of the quill arm on a drill press is like this, on a mortiser like this. The reason for that is it takes a lot of leverage, it takes a lot of torque. So if you're doing 1/4 inch mortises, you could probably get away with it, maybe get away with it on a drill press. But a dedicated mortiser is going to do, the first time I did mortises on a mortiser, I was like mind blown. I was doing 1/2 inch mortises, red oak posts for a king size bed. Man, it made it easy. It really made it easy. Honolulu, Hawaii. I noticed the rifle rack in the back wall with the bows in it. Did you make bows? And if so, any plans for a class? So I made one of those bows. The rest, the one I shoot the most, the one I hunt with, was made for me. So if you're interested in stick bows, Tom Turgeon, Boise Bows and Arrows, is the guy. So he was at my old shop. He did a class there. That's when I built my bow. And then as a gift, he made me the one I hunt with. He does classes all over the country, very commonly in woodcraft stores. It's really neat. Making that bow is one of the coolest woodworking things I've ever done. Tom likes to say, you start with a stick, a stave, and Tom likes to say, we're going to work it, and then you have to teach the wood to bend. And I love that idea, that you've got this rigid stick of wood that you're going to draw, bend into a U, and then fire arrow after arrow after arrow. So just, I like Tom, I like the way he teaches, I like the whole woodworking aspect of working the wood, tillering the bow. There's lots of stuff involved there. It was really, really neat. Look him up. Advice on purchasing a bandsaw for general woodworking. What size and features would you recommend? 14-inch bandsaw I had for years in my shop. That was a very, very useful size for me. With a lot of the 14-inch bandsaws, you can, if you choose to, add a riser block. So out of the box, a lot of the 14-inch saws have a 6-inch capacity, which could serve you forever, depending on what you want to do. Eventually, I added a riser block to mine, which changed its capacity from 6 to 12. The reason I did it is because of my bowl turning. So when I want to cut a blank like that round, before I put it on the lathe, I needed that extra thickness capacity in order to be able to do that. So that's a great size. Features, if you can get one with a brake, the saw I have now has a brake on it. It's the first bandsaw I've had with a brake. I love it. I will probably never own a bandsaw again that doesn't have a brake. I love being able to bring that blade right to a stop. Couple of dust collection ports. I'm looking at my bandsaw. One high, one low gives you better dust collection than just one high. That's probably about it. How important is CFM amount of a dust collector if every machine will have a blast gate and I only have one open at a time? The other thing that affects, or it's affected by, is the length of your runs. So CFM, power, airflow, that whole thing is also a function of, are we doing 10 feet of pipe or are we doing 20 feet of pipe, 30 feet of pipe, 40 feet of pipe? Is there going to be flexible hose that comes down to your machines? Because don't hold me to this number, but it's something like 4 feet of flex hose is the equivalent of like 20 feet of pipe because of the corrugations in it. So there are a lot of factors involved. Like a table saw requires about 400 CFM to have good pickup. A planer is maybe 600 CFM. That doesn't mean I can say, okay, the planer's the highest, so I'm just going to get a 600 CFM dust collector. It'll be great. Because you got to get from there to there. You got to get, I'm pointing to my dust collector and my planer. So pipe, hose, Ys, Ts, fittings, all of that stuff affects your efficiency. Upstate New York, recommendations for classes, books, or resources for designing cabinets. Yeah, I have a good, I don't know about any schools or anything in upstate New York. Specific classes, books, or resources. Yeah, on the design side, I'm very self-taught. So I'm sorry I don't have anything good for you there. Any chance of getting notified earlier than 20 minutes before you go live? Well, these are always the second Thursday of the month, unless I'm out of town or something. So I can pass that along. I don't disagree that it'd be nice to know a day ahead of time, but you can also mark your cap. Part of the reason we do this repeatability, 7 o'clock Central Time, second Thursday of every month, unless I'm in Nashville or North Carolina or Texas or someplace. All right, we're running out of tiempo. Recommended layout for T-track on an assembly table. These are 2 feet apart, and that has served me very well the way I use them. Do you have a video on a lathe stand or table? We did a video a lot of years ago on a cabinet for mini lathes. It was in DVD form. I'm not sure if it's streaming on the site. If you go to WWGOA.com, upper right-hand corner, there's a search window. Type in there lathe cabinet, lathe stand, and see if it pops. They're slowly converting all the DVDs to the streaming platform, but there's 130 DVDs, so they haven't got to them all yet. What bandsaw do you have? I've got the Laguna 1412BX. Titebond II shelf life. Well, I would double check with Titebond itself on that. A year is popping into my head, but I'm not 100% sure. How can you tell if the glue has got any kind of a weird smell to it, or I've seen sometimes with the yellow glues, which that also is, if you go to try to use it, it's really stringy. Then it has sat too long. But I would double check with Titebond's customer service on the shelf life question. What sort of classes do you have planned for WWGOA website subscribers this year? I'm trying to think, because it's always confusing because there's stuff that we shot months ago that's still, it's in edit. or I'm producing the ancillary documents to go with it, and it's not up yet. So there's a more advanced CNC one that we did. There's a shave horse that we did as a project. Resin, some resin work. So off the top of my head, if I'm in the right time frame here, I think that's the newest. That'll be the newest stuff to look for. Okay, 8 o'clock. Thanks for watching. Let's see, I'm trying to think of upcoming events. I'm going to go take a class. I'm stupid excited. I'm going to go take a bowl turning class from Ashley Harwood. That is going to be so much fun. I can't wait. And as far as me teaching on the road, I've got a couple coming up, but I can't remember where they are. The first one I can think of is Weekend with Wood in May, but I know I've got stuff before that. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching, and see you a month from today. What is that going to be, February? Well, we'll see if that goes. I might be out of town that particular day. We'll watch for the emails, and you'll know what I know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Happy New Year, and take care of yourselves. See ya.